Hey, you're watching Your Plates Are Mine, the cooking show where you don't have to be a professional chef to be a star in your own kitchen. I'm your host, David Miller, and we bring you the best recipes from cooks just like you and I. So what do you say? Spend a little time with us, and we're going to show you how to make a fantastic recipe that you're going to want to share with your family and friends. Welcome back to another episode of Your Plates Are Mine. I'm here in Walling, Tennessee at the Foglight Food House with Edward Philpot. Edward, thank you so much for having us.
You bet.
I've been looking forward to this show for a long time. Tell us a little bit about the food house and how you got started. I know you got a great story with that.
Well, the Foglight Food House started back in '97, kind of on a whim. My brothers and I were sitting around my brother's living room, and one of my brothers said, you know, I've got a great idea. I've come up with something that Walling really needs. And I said, well, Walling needs 1,000 things.
It needs a lot of stuff.
It needs a lot of stuff. And one of them said a restaurant. And I said, well, it needs a lot of things before it needs a restaurant. But to make a long story short, 3 months later, we opened up the Foglight right here in Walling. We're about 30 miles south of Cookeville, 15 miles north of McMinnville, right on the edge of Rock Island. We tell a lot of people that we actually kind of look down on Rock Island because we sit up on a hill.
That's neat. You're right over the river, aren't you?
Yeah, right on the Caney Fork River, absolutely.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, what are we going to make today?
We're going to make a stuffed pork loin. It's also called a roulade.
A roulade?
Yeah, roulade. Roulade, the word roulade comes from roulere, which is French. It means to roll.
Okay.
A lot of you have probably heard of the Italian version called a braciole or braciola. The Germans make a rouladen, and the French make a dish from it called a paupiette. We're just going to call this a roulade because that's easiest to remember.
Okay.
It'll be stuffed with Gruyere cheese, caramelized onions, macerated cranberries. We're going to make a really nice lavender cream sauce to garnish it.
Wow.
And then we're going to saute it with some beautiful garden fresh vegetables.
I can't wait.
First thing we need to do for their stuffing, one of the major components is cranberries. You can use fresh cranberries or dried. I prefer dried. They're a little bit more predictable, and we've always got them on hand here at the restaurant.
Okay.
Don't have to worry about them spoiling. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to macerate them. And what that means is to just essentially soak them. You can do that with wine or liquor. You can use chicken stock, veal stock, beef stock. You can use a saltwater brine. We're just going to use a decent Chardonnay.
All right.
And all that's going to do is just kind of soften them up so they're not quite as chewy. So if you want to finish that off, pour about a cup of wine in that.
A cup of wine.
There's probably a cup and a half of cranberries in there, just for recipe purposes. And like I said, this is going to soften the cranberries up. It's going to completely change the flavor profile. It won't eliminate the cranberry flavor. It'll enhance it because what goes better with berries than berries?
A little fruit with fruit with fruit.
That's right. One decent size, medium to large onion for this type of recipe.
Okay.
You can use any onion you want. You can use Vidalia, red onion, yellow onion. I just chose a good plain yellow onion because I've got 100 pounds of them here at the restaurant.
Okay.
So. First thing we'll do is we'll caramelize them, which will bring out a lot of the natural sugars in it. It'll change the color and the texture.
Makes them a little sweeter.
A lot sweeter. And then, to make it even sweeter than that, I'm going to introduce some sugar at the end of the saute. All that does, it'll just give it another level of flavor.
Nice. All right, let's do it.
Okay. Caramelizing starts out with a saute. You want to get your pan really, really, really good and hot, especially before you introduce the oil. If you don't, it will impart kind of a metallic flavor. I have no explanation for that, but it does. And what we use, for the most part, is liquid butter, generally clarified butter, which is butter that's been cooked down to relieve the butter of most of its moisture, not all of it, but it'll foam up somewhat. You can see as it cooks, it's foaming. All that's doing is it's cooking all the water out of it. So you're going to wait till that's done, and until the oil is working is the term. And you can tell it's working by, you'll see motion in it. If you look at it closely enough, you probably can't pick that up, but it's not quite hot enough. The way that I test it, and I don't recommend doing this at home, is I like to stick my finger in it. If I can't leave it in there longer than about a half a second, I know that I'm probably ready to do a good saute.
There's a big difference between the guy at home finger and the professional chef finger.
Yes, this finger has no feeling.
Yeah.
So we're just going to do all these onions. Make sure that you tilt the pan away from you if you're doing this on gas so that you can gather all the oil in the front of the saute pan. Introduce your product, and it's okay to put all of it in there. Of course, keep in mind that if you're flipping this, you'll make a mess. There's no way around it. Now we'll just let these cook down. You can break these apart with a pair of tongs, or if your fingers are dead like mine are, you can use your hands. I don't recommend it. It's a little bit dangerous. The heat is extreme. Once they're fully coated with oil, you can put in a little bit of salt and a little bit of cracked black pepper. And if you want to change the flavor profile, which I highly recommend, put a little bit of granulated garlic.
Nice.
Now this process should take about, if you've got high heat like this, should take about 4 or 5 minutes at the most.
Okay.
Now that there's this point, I like to put in a good amount of sugar. All that's doing is candying them. And what this does is it will somewhat replace the sweetness that we lose in the cranberries because they've been dried. And it just adds another level of flavor to the stuffing.
All right, now that the onions are ready, what's next?
Well, the next thing we need to do, now that the onions have cooled and have been caramelized, we need to drain off all of this residual here, because this is a lot of that oil that we talked about in the saute, a lot of that excess. And we are going to reserve this, however, and I'll show you why here in just a little bit. We don't need to get rid of all of it. This cheese is one of the most beautiful cheeses known to man. It's called Gruyere.
Gruyere.
Yeah, it's nutty, it's sweet, it's rich, and it's perfect for this application.
Excellent.
I prefer to use the coarsest section of the box grater. It makes nice, long, thin strips of cheese. It's a lot easier to introduce it to a stuffing. It doesn't soak up all the moisture like smaller shredded cheese would. So if you would shred up that entire block and most of this one as well.
Do you want me to put it right in with the onions?
Yes, please. Just put it right on top. Keeping in mind, of course, that the onions have got to be good and cool before you start this, because if it's not, it's going to melt the cheese and make it gummy and sticky. And, and that in turn will change the flavor profile of the stuffing.
Okay.
So these guys have been soaking for by now probably 30 minutes, 45 minutes at the most. They're starting to get nice and soft. You can tell that they're plumping up. They'll actually get a little bit bigger. Once all the cheese is shredded and put in there with the onions, we're just going to pour. Okay.
That right here.
Yep.
Go ahead and grate the rest in there.
Yeah, I think we're going to need all of it.
All right. Let me go ahead.
That's done, and that's perfect.
All right.
That is the way the stuffing is supposed to look. The first step in doing your roulade is you want to make sure that there aren't any bone fragments anywhere on this loin. And of course there aren't. You can tell by looking and also by running your hand over it. A lot of people find it necessary to cut this portion of the, a lot of people call that the lip or the tail. It's not necessary. I do like to cut that off because it's got some connective tissues in it that that can be a little chewy. It's not worth anything. Don't keep it. Don't even try, because it's full of silver skin. And then the next thing we'll do is we're going to start by cutting this this fat cap off. What you want to do is you want to end up with a as uniform a thickness in this meat as you can get. Ideally around 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch. I'm not going to do it that thin because I'm just not that good at it. So what I do is I go halfway into the side of the meat, cutting just to the edge of the loin here.
All right.
In other words, you don't want to cut all the way through.
You don't want to go too far. You just wind up with 2 pieces.
Right. So we're just going to cut it just like this, get it probably 3/4 of the way in, and just start pulling it away. And then as we pull it, we'll make real easy relief cuts. And the more you cut it, of course, the more it'll open up. Again, being very careful not to cut all the way through it. If you cut all the way through it, you're going to end up with holes, and your stuffing's going to come out. It'll burn in the pan, and that'll just kind of screw the dish up. So now, we've got a pretty uniform thickness right through that center rib there. But that's not enough. We're going to have to cut this portion here and this portion the exact same way. We just cut the entire loin. So we'll start from the center.
Aha! There you go. So it's kind of like an M, and then
Right.
you're going to cut into it and fold it back out and wind up with a nice uniform.
So now what you want to do, for uniformity's sake, is you can use a meat mallet, you can use the edge of a plate. I prefer to use the side of my fist. And all we do is we just tap on it to work some of those thicker places down. All you do right now is just lay the stuffing on it. Just cover the whole thing up with it. All right. You just want to press that on there to get a nice, good, uniform thickness. To start this roll, you want to keep it as tight as you can. And just take your time with it. There's no point being in a hurry at this point. Just roll it.
Just roll it up. And then kind of pack the stuffing as you go so it doesn't get away from you.
Yep, pull the stuffing back. Because you don't want to lose it. Just start on the back, just like we did before. And just tie a little knot in it. And as far as how tight you want this, you don't want to pull it really, really tight, because this thing is actually going to expand a little bit when you cook it.
So you don't want it to really cut into the meat, you just want to hold it.
Right.
All right.
And just put a good old knot in it.
Just put a granny knot, 2/2 inches.
Yep. Cut off the tag end. Now here's the neat part. This is how we can tie it. We can truss this thing. We can do this right here all the way down with one piece of string.
All right.
So all you do, take your string like this, wrap it around the back and under, take your long end and just pull it under that loop and pull it all the way through.
See, I didn't know I was going to get my Boy Scout knot tying merit badge today either.
I forgot the badge.
That's all right.